Good afternoon. My name is Per Strömbäck. I'm the editor of Netopia forum on the Netopia.eu, I should say, forum for the digital society. And thanks for a very interesting panel. It seems that video is a big driver for demand in the networks, and it seems also that in terms of video piracy, it has shifted, or it's mutating from illegal downloads or file sharing into illegal services, illegal streaming services. So my question is, how is that best addressed? Or rather, do you see this as, never mind, it creates demand for bandwidth, who cares? Or do you see that this is a challenge that you need to play a part in addressing, also considering that many of the ISPs also offer video services? Thank you.
Okay, anyone wants to talk about video on demand and internet traffic? Mr. Louette, you're on your phone, so you get penalised for that. So you can answer. The question is, very much about how the video on demand traffic, affects your networks as an ISP.
Yeah, well, everybody knows, and Mr. McAdam mentioned it. Video accounts for like 60–70% of the traffic that we have, and one should also remember that in the coming world, we will hardly be monetizing voice, telephony. We will hardly be monetizing SMS because the service plans are unlimited SMS. It's almost for free now. So we're monetizing data, and in data, video. This is the reality of our business. And in the United States, I know that the operators tend to make a lot of acquisitions in the video field. I think AT&T acquired 12 companies over the last 18 months in the video sector, and it's based, I think, on one perspective. People will be consuming video in mobility. That's the perspective, and so you have to give to them the best possible access to contents which are adapted to mobility. So they are even going as far as reintegrating the production capacities within their chain of value in order to deliver to the customers something that will be, adapted to the screen, adapted to the place, the area, and the network. When it comes to European operators, again, we've had a hard time in the previous 4 or 5 years, adapting and funding all the transitions we had to fund. You were kind enough to say that today I think there is alignment between the expectations of everybody, the consumer, the companies also, but we went through a very, very hard transition period. I don't think it's completely over, but at least we have alignment, and at least we have a recognition within the European community, I think, of what we need for tomorrow. When it comes to Orange more specifically, I don't know if that was your question, and I will not be too long, but we have control of a company called Dailymotion, which is a sort of nice alternative to YouTube. So through that ownership, with the company generating tens of millions of unique visitors and video views, we understand more about what people watch, what they want to see, how long it's going to be, how you monetize it, and about all of those models. So it's interesting. It's already a good step in that direction. It's a growing company, which is a great success since the last 5 years. We want to go more in that direction probably in the future.
Very interesting. Can I ask you a Belgacom question, actually? Obviously, you signed a deal last week with Netflix, who we have speaking later today, Reed Hastings. Have you seen any, is the service already in operation? Have you seen any pickup in traffic already? Can you give me an idea of how much, say, Netflix takes on your networks?
Oh, it's amazing. I've seen some graphs. And already the first night where Netflix was available, you saw at 12 o'clock at night a huge peak in traffic. So a lot of people were waiting just to be able to try Netflix, and were staying up at night between 12 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning. You had a peak in traffic on our internet, which was never seen. So there is indeed a lot of impact. But I think for us, what's important is that we see ourselves as a gateway for our customers to get access to the best content they want. And in that sense, I think we should not exclude anyone. And that's why, for instance, we saw a deal with Netflix as a very positive one, because I think it's easier to watch Netflix on your television through the set-top box and through the remote control of the operator than it is sometimes to do it on your PC, your tablet, or try to connect your TV with smart TV. So we saw it as a way for us to make sure that our customer could get easy access to what they want. And that's how we see it. And of course, you will have to do some investments behind it, because it will probably put some stress on your network whatsoever. But I think that's, and for me, I'm not that long in that industry. I'm 3 years in that industry, and probably I've not known the 10 years ago when there were some dominant players in some country. Today, there are no dominant players. There is a lot of competition. There is too much competition in Europe. I think we are with 75 operators or even more in Europe, where you have 5 in the US. So I personally don't understand today the way we are regulated, which is a way to, I think what Europe needs is growth. I mean, and we desperately need growth in Europe. We are confronted with potential deflations, we are not growing, and so we need growth. You have here in front of you industry players that are willing to invest billions of euros in Europe to grow their network, to provide the infrastructure, and to provide the technology to the customers and to the industry that needs it to grow. And for such a reason, I don't know, today, it seems that we are not able to do it because we monetize these investments. And so for me, it's a very strange way that we are confronted with. We want to invest, we want to grow our business, we really think that we can be a key enabler for also industries and enterprises to grow again. Because if we don't do it, I mean, you just go to Silicon Valley and those places and you see what's happening. A lot of services are currently provided by very big global players that are providing a lot of services to our customers and bypassing a lot of industry here. We are able to provide these type of services locally in Europe as well. And so we just need to invest in that, invest in infrastructure, invest in services, invest in big data, invest in all those new services that can help our European industry to fight their place in the new ecosystem. And so for me, it's very strange that today a lot of the regulatory measures are in a way inhibiting us to do that. And so I'm perhaps a bit naive, as I'm not that long and I've not known the years where you probably had some very strong incumbent. But today I think we just need the regulation to evolve with the market reality and let us invest in what people need and let us make sure that we can defend our European industry against what happens in the world. So that would be my plea. And in that sense, coming back to video and Netflix, I see it as a natural way to partner with OTT to provide that content to the people in Europe that wants it. But of course, we need behind the scene to be able to invest in the network and monetize it.
Yeah, yeah. Does that, Mr. Nemat, obviously Deutsche Telekom also carry Netflix. Is that where regulation should be heading towards then? A more holistic approach to regulating technology groups, including things like taxation and jurisdiction, as well as telecoms groups in terms of infrastructure and bringing the two things together? Can that happen, do you think? I'm asking it. Well, Mr. Recchi, go on, you stepped in there.
Okay, rephrase the question, please.
I'll rephrase the question.
You're pointing there.
Yeah, I was pointing to Mr. Nemat, but can you answer the question, or are you...
I think she's asking you, but he's asking you, but if you rephrase...
Please, yes.
Okay. So your question was whether the regulators should take a more holistic approach on the sector rather than the operator industry. This is how I understood it. And I would say yes, for sure, because for already a long time, the boundaries between the industries have merged and we see convergence at all fronts. And therefore, it doesn't make sense just to look very specifically only as the telco operators. And when we are talking about fairness and level playing field, it's really about applying that avenue of light touch regulation to all and making sure that there is no discrimination of certain players. In this case, we believe us, against the others who are out there. So I think that's part of a very holistic approach regulation should take.
Mr. Kuhn.
No, I just would like to be a bit provocative. And I guess it was, let's say, interesting to listen to what the regulator said earlier on during her speech. We're in a world which is a little bit strange. We have a regulation framework which is still articulated or centered around access and voice. And that's it. It has been built, in fact, 20 years ago. And so we are living in this framework. The industry has completely shifted towards video, towards services, towards content, no frontiers, no barriers, no country, and we are not adapting the way we regulate the sector. So we have a complete disconnect in between regulation framework on one side and the way the industry is evolving. So until we solve this problem, we will remain in the situation in which we are. And I guess that what was presented earlier on was moving in that direction. And what has been done in the US has moved and has embraced this transition. So again, I think that it's really the good moment when we have a new commission which has no legacy. I mean, they can really build the new century to try to think about how do we reconcile the regulatory framework, because of course we need a regulatory framework, but which has to be adapted to the new reality. And I guess we can debate, but at the end of the day, let's move on and let's forget about voice and access. We're all speaking about video centricity, we're all speaking about international development, we're all speaking about scale, we're all speaking about investments needed. Look, let's free that.
Mr. Vestberg, sorry.
Yeah, maybe coming back a little bit what I can see. I mean, we're working with TV and media in basically 180 countries, and you would see that operators are investing a lot in CDN so they can cash and get a much better experience for consumers. DRM solutions, digital right management, is much more common coming into networks as we're getting prime content coming in. And then, of course, all types of acceleration to see that it's working. So that we're seeing directly now in the mobile networks. And this, the ladies and gentlemen, has already confirmed that the majority of everything in the networks in 5 years from now will be some kind of video and media. And the investment we see in the TV and media area where we are into is clearly indicating that not only in the infrastructure, but also DRM, CDN, MDN, and all these type of things that is needed to deliver prime content that needs to secure that whatever you have bought has a digital right management, etc. Then, of course, there are areas that are always going to be debated, but it's clearly seen that I can see all around the world this is a big investment. And thinking about it right now, that majority of the world, they have not even started. They might not even have a TV, so they wouldn't start with that. So the first time they get some content will actually be on handset or some connected device. So this, I think, is happening as we speak. And I think that's very important also to add to the investment that's done right now.
Mr. Recchi.
Yeah, and to complete, I think the old problem is about balancing offer and demand, because usually states and governments, what they want to see is incumbents or any player just creating the offer, meaning the infrastructure, such that the demand can cope with it and grow with it. But again, we're not at the time where the investment were seeded by the government. Actually, all the big infrastructure were built by the government, such to create the highway for cars to come in the future. This time is over, so you can invest as much as you want, but you cannot go too far. Because if the demand doesn't come after you, you basically go broke because you need a market. So that's where the regulator has to play a big role, because you have to play together with the government, with the public-private partnership, not just on seeding investments and making all investment possible, but creating the culture, the mindset, the digital approach. So there's no sense today that we cable all the schools in a country and then the students don't have the computer, the teachers don't know what to teach, and nobody pays for the fiber there. So you need to create the environment that this goes together, and that's what the regulator should be about.
So this is a potentially a criticism of a policy to supply side focused in that case. The idea that, you know, everyone needs 50 megabits per second broadband at home. I mean, do you think that's a relevant discussion, or should it be more about what people need as opposed to maybe want in future? Mr. Recchi.
You know, this is an issue that needs to be, it's more about strategic planning. Neither country have a strategic plan for anything. We don't have a strategic plan for energy, we don't have a strategic plan for transportation, we don't have a strategic plan for digital agenda. So digital agenda is a wish list that any political leader now wants to put in place and would like to have the same day in the morning an offer of €1 a year for all the gigabytes possible, everything included, and at the night everything connected. So these two things don't go together. And the numbers that you have in Europe is about 250 billion in the next 5 years of infrastructure that are needed, and on top there is more than 100 billion to make the digital agenda possible. So where is this money coming from? That's the whole point. Where is the, unless it's a private government, don't have the money to invest directly because of their financial statement are that poor. So unless you create the environment, you go nowhere. And that's what we're all saying here.
Mm-hmm. So, Mr. Vestberg, just and actually to Mr. Koum as well, both you do a lot of business in China, for example. A huge 4G market, probably the most 4G base stations now in the world in China. What are they? Presumably, this is a sort of central policy which has allowed them to do this, and a market. I'm guessing that not everyone in China needs 4G, but they're gambling ahead of the curve there. Is that right?
I think it's two things. I mean, of course, China is deploying 4G in volume by far the biggest. But remember, also China is a very large country, so of course. But they have definitely decided, both from regulatory point of view and from country point of view, that 4G will benefit. And I think there's no one debating today that broadband is actually leading to growth in a country. But I think, coming back to Mr. Recchi here, I think it's very important that having a broadband plan is not enough. I mean, that's great to have, but you need to say that then I'm going to digitalize my education, my healthcare, and then you start getting the benefit. And I think that's where we see the most efficient countries, that they are the ones that have done that. And then you can actually pay off the investment as well. But to saying only we want a broadband plan and these operators invest in it, that's usually not the best way. And I think that is sort of what I see when we go all around the world. You make the combination and a commitment also from governments that we will invest in digitalization, and then you're going to see that investment coming as well. So I think here we are lacking when we're talking a lot about infrastructure. We need roads, yes, we need hospitals, but the 21st century infrastructure is actually ICT and telecom. And of course, if you use that as a country, you're going to get the competitive advantage. And if you then extend that to Europe, then you're really getting into some great things. But then you also need to take those decisions, not only asking for a broadband plan. I think that's not good enough. And I think that is where I'm coming from. And then coming back to China, then of course they are investing in that and seeing that this is a transformative technology that's going to make efficiency, growth for the country, and new services for the population and the citizens. That's very important.
Yeah. Would you see that Europe is behind places like China and the US in your dealings with the operators in those countries?
I guess that it was, let's say, said earlier on, there is no debate. I mean, today, and let's say, my colleagues are doing a great job, but I mean, they are refrained from development. Dominique was saying, I would like to invest more, but I just can't. And so what we see is that in all those other countries, mainly US and China, there is, let's say, a much bigger willingness to invest in those type of infrastructures. Let's take the example of China. I guess that in 2 years, they will have built, just for one operator, 600,000 sites. Yeah. So, which is more than whatever we build elsewhere in the world. There is a vision, there is a willingness, there is scale, which matters, of course, and then there is a regulatory framework, which is, let's say, more friendly. I just wanted also to make a comment, because I'm always a bit, let's say, surprised when I see that. That's only in Europe that we are still speaking about incumbents. And we say, well, we have to regulate incumbents. But they are incumbents of what? I mean, of, let's say, a world which has disappeared. So my colleagues are no more incumbents. They are one player among all the others. Yeah. So that's why I'm a bit also surprised. I mean, we have to adapt our logiciel, as we would say in French, our software, and to live in the real world and we are traveling with ants every day, Korea, China, US, all around the world. And I can tell you that it's moving so fast that we would like this, let's say, to appear also in Europe in order to unlock growth. And I guess that Dominique was right. What we are shooting for in Europe is growth, and we have a place where we can unlock growth.
Mr. Louette, talking from a former incumbent.
So we share with Claudia the honor, actually, of being incumbents. And we don't travel around the world all the time because, we have work to do in our countries here. We can't, So, and we're focusing on certain things. One of them, for instance, Michel's remark was bringing me to that. I think we should probably, if we speak again about regulation, because it's really one of the items for today, and it's a defining moment for regulation. Now, I don't want to be, maybe not me or one of my colleagues in 5 years of time ahead of this, sitting at this place and saying again in 5 years, we need to change the regulation and we need to adapt to the world, Because 5 years ago, more or less, I heard the same thing. So it's like the film in which, the day always starts over and over again. I think it's really time for us now to bring it to a change. And maybe, to be precise, one of the things we can propose is that people should be considered differently in Europe based on the investment that they make on the ground. And from all the perspectives, it's relevant for telecom operators. Most of them try or have become convergent now, have fixed and mobile. Most of them, I would say, and all the incumbents, but some others also, invest heavily in the grounds, in the ducts, putting networks in the ground. Vodafone typically has started doing this in a big way. You will. You're in the next panel. You were so close. So this has started, and some others are more, virtual operators investing less, actually contributing less to every country's enrichment. We know that when we put €1 in fiber in France, it creates €6 of value overall. So there is a multiplication effect which is very strong. And then it takes us to another category of people who do not, I think, invest enough in the fertile grounds of Europe that they will harvest later on. They will harvest value that they haven't created. And those are the over-the-top players. The times are changing for them too. I think the fiscal reform is on its way. That gives me hope for the future of regulation reform, of many reforms, because it takes time, but then the wake-up call has come and the changes have started coming. The OECD is working very cleverly in that regard too. So everybody should be judged and fiscalized and subsidized or not based on what they invest in Europe and what brings value to the European people. I think it's another way of considering regulation for the future.
Interesting, yeah. Of course, Mr. Bailey, and we'll go to the floor after your comments.
Just wanted to address 2 points that Michel made. I think Giuseppe made it as well, which is where's the money going to come from? Well, there is only one answer, which of course is from the public markets, in reality, for the volumes we're talking about here. And what we've seen from the last 10 years of the telecom sector is what investors have rewarded management for is effectively taking money out of the sector.
Absolutely.
And what investors want to see is they want to invest in something that's growing. It's quite simple. And something that has stability and that there's trust fundamentally in what the sector will be able to do in terms of investment and earning return from that. And that's, I think, at the heart of this whole debate.
That's a healthy industry.
But the good news is that the money is there.
Can you hear me? Hi, I'm Theo Burt from Google. I was very interested in what Monsieur Leroy was saying about investment and regulation being matched to that. Analysis Mason published a report yesterday showing that the OTTs, Facebook and Google and others, invested $100 billion in the physical network around the world over the last 3 years, including $30 billion in Europe. And we're investing all the way around the world in undersea cables, often in partnership with other players. Is that a model that the panel would welcome to see more of in Europe? Is it something regulators should encourage?
Good question. Would you like to see Google becoming an incumbent?
It's always nice when you mention the OTTs. There is always someone from Google, or someone representing Google that comes up. And actually, I was with Google last week in California with Google Fiber, and we were discussing, possible ways of sharing what we learn on the grounds. And they were telling me one very interesting thing is when Google Fiber rolls out networks. It's actually the only moment with this kind of conference in which someone meets someone from Google. Usually Google is an invisible man of the world or group of people. When the fiber man comes, then he's, oh, you're from Google, actually, this is Google. You can physically see. So the other opportunity is when you're there, guys. So I can see you from far. So no, I know that Google has invested heavily in the United States. What I was mentioning was a regulation in Europe, for Europe, based on the contribution of people, the real contribution on the ground in creating jobs, in maintaining jobs sometimes, because incumbents know how to do this, maybe too much for the markets, but they have to do it. In our company, for instance, 30,000 people will walk from the company until 2020 in normal ways at the end of their careers. They will not be entirely replaced, but we'll still have 70,000 in France. It's a huge number of people. So we contribute to the real economy, and we pay taxes not only because we're incumbent, because we've always paid taxes of all kinds in Europe, and we were not born in the brand new world of fiscal optimization, if you want. So we're different animals. What I just want to stress, I have a lot of respect for the new animals, and I'm a big user, a big fan of many of their services, but what I want to stress is that we cannot be put together in the same in the same category, if you want. And actually, we cannot be in an overregulated world and they would be completely unregulated. They cannot be considered as a public service that should be brought completely free to everybody in the world and not pay taxes, because usually public services are funded by taxes. So I want to make those differences a bit clearer, and I don't know if I succeed, but I want it to be clear that we intend to have this evolution. And I think it's one of the ways, it's one of the proposals that we make is, pay more attention to the ones really investing in the grounds, to the ones really contributing, because that makes sense if you want to be judged as a European company.
So you'd welcome Google coming to France and to Germany and the other countries, not Germany so much, but the other countries you're in, and digging up the roads and digging up the streets and putting their own fibre in and competing with you head-to-head as a fibre operator?
No, but for instance, if you take the fibre example, it's very interesting. The way fibre is rolled out in the United States now, at least from what I understand from Google, and I'm not completely, I have not all the knowledge, but they walk into a neighborhood and they ask the people around, would you consider being fibered? If people are interested, they start paying something upfront, symbolic if you want, but some money, before they get anything. And then if there's a majority of people, then they fiber the place. In other countries, let's take the example that I know best of, which is France. Obviously, I spend a lot of time in this geography. You have to roll out complete networks in complete neighborhoods in the 5 coming years. It's a complete perspective. It's very different. And when you start, you speak with the governments, you describe the plans you have, then you have to roll them out completely. It's very, it's not driven in the same way. So the geographies are very different and the regulations are different. What I know is that occasionally we will be fighting or competing for the value created by and for the customer, and we're not playing under the same rules. So I know I keep repeating the same thing, but I think this has to be stressed, and the rules have started being harmonized in the fiscal area. I wish it were the same in other areas. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. We've got a question up on the top left.
Robert Karubi from DHL. We speak of a certain spirit, a certain amount of leadership, a holistic approach, a European approach, and I appreciate the sentiment that it's now time to just execute and do things. Let's just implement and get going on this one. But from my opinion, we're in an environment here in Europe where more and more recently, I have a feeling that we're getting a little bit more inward looking. Governments are more nationalistic and not wanting to take risks because of their local situations, so to speak. This particular sector scares a lot of people in that as a consumer, I can go where I want to, look at what I want to, research what I want to, where I want to, however I want to. And that scares a lot of people because they lose control to a degree. They're not in control of that information anymore. I can go access it wherever I want to. How do we overcome? You can't just have this change in regulation for this sector alone. It has to happen across a wide number of sectors. How do we overcome this issue of nationalistic feeling or inward looking or maintaining control of what I have? Because otherwise we'll never get to a point with this particular sector where we do what we need to do at a European level and not at a country level.
Trust, I have to say, is something which is difficult to build and easy to be destroyed with similar things. The sheer fact that we talk about ourselves and are talked about as incumbents is also a fraction of, in the regulation, that the consumers need to be protected against our potentially from the past coming monopolistic behavior. Trust. Light touch regulation requires trust. Digital market requires giving in national authorities. And you are right saying so. Currently we see in many countries different tendencies. Absolutely different tendencies. Now let me speak very practically how I'm trying to create trust, because one of the biggest projects I'm driving now for 2 years is actually the creation of a pan-European network which speaks the same language, IP, and which ensures fast product introduction across countries. Now when you start by finding a bunch of people, and everyone in Greece Greek, everyone in Croatia almost Croatian, the leadership team are inherited all German, all men. Nothing against German men, I have to say, really. No, so don't get me wrong. And People who have spent their entire life in a specific function, let's say accounting or technology, how much do you think the people are willing to step into each other's shoes? So therefore, one of the things I started before I was even talking about the vision of a pan-European network is rotation. My new chief HR officer is a lady from Croatia, B2B leader from Greece, commercial leader, very much Hungarian topics. I sent people from Greece to the board of directors in Poland and a German to the Netherlands, and. I'm not saying that this is solving the problem entirely, but unless we accept that for trust and leadership, open up the mindset and bringing different people together is absolutely necessary, we will never get there. And what I'm now seeing is that people put themselves into the shoes of standing for my own country, but also taking care of what happens in other countries. That is not a recipe for success, I would say, but it's a necessary condition to actually instill trust. And by the way, I think we need that for the political elites as well. Really, we need that for the political elites as well. We need more rotation, and it's difficult from business to politics and also moving people around in Europe, because otherwise, when pressure comes, we come back to an old habit of that continent, which is very dangerous, yeah? Which has created almost a disaster, or de facto a disaster in the last century, which is inward orientation and sticking to yourself, yeah? And so we need to, I think, jointly work on overcoming this. Practically speaking, I do it like this.
Has the US, the revelation of the US activities on surveillance, security, have they changed the debate? Have they caused more inward looking, do you think, among governments, among networks?
Okay, I'm lost in a rose. No, yeah, of course, but it's not strange. I mean, we are getting into the, I think Michel said it, we have been having voice, SMS and fixed broadband. Suddenly we have everything connected with data, and of course, there will come some challenges with all the benefits we have been discussing here. There is a lot of benefits. And of course, then you need to debate the challenges, and don't, because you cannot stop the technology revolution, and you shouldn't, because it will be benefit of the society we're into. So of course, we need to debate this much more, and we need to be more open about it and risk. But remember, 95% of everything we are bringing to the table, or broadband, media coming together and all of that, that is a great benefit for our society. It's no debate. Then of course, that always brings some challenges. That means that we, as leaders, we need to discuss that challenges, if it is with politicians or regulators or between us, that we have to continue to do, because there will be some challenges. But we always need to remember that the majority of what we're bringing is actually positive impact on our society, communication, democracy, and a lot of great things. So I think that stride we will have in the future, and I think that we just need to continue to have an open debate about it.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? We've got two at the back, one in the middle, one here, sorry. Sir.
Yeah, my name is Peter Onimus. I'm a private investor from Switzerland who's been involved in telco for the last 30 years. I think Europe has one big problem, and that's that we have very little innovation left in telecommunication. And when you look at the people like myself who are entrepreneurs, they all go direction America, so they go to Google or whoever to ask for money. And when we look at what we had 15, 20 years ago, we had a proud Ericsson, a proud Nokia, and today, without being rough, I don't think there are any smart European startup entrepreneurs who are looking for money in Europe or who are looking for the growth in Europe. And that's partly forced by the telcos, and that's partly forced by the whole economy. But for me, being totally independent, I think when I listen to the panel, you all kind of blame the politicians, lack of funding, etc. And all these are excuses for us not trying to innovate and move on. And one of the very best examples is if you look at the latest report from McKinsey on global healthcare, that's going to be the biggest growth factor for the telcos going forward, being a $50 billion industry by 2020. And there's not a single telco in Europe who can show me a multi-billion-dollar investment and growth plan around digital health in Europe. And I was just in America the last 2 weeks. When you look at what they're doing over there, it's a very different story. And me being European, I'm half Danish, half Swiss, I think it's very sad because we would do to the telecommunication industry, what we did to the automobile industry, what we did to the steel industry, etc. So I don't know who wants to answer that one.
50% of all 4G traffic in the world is going through Ericsson equipment. So that has been innovated in Europe. I mean, we spend 60% of all our R&D of $5 billion in Europe. We are not a startup. We started 1876. So I understand that we're not seen as that, but we have to remember that there's a lot of investment done in Europe as well on this type, but not maybe in healthcare. So I think that is something also to remember, that we all continue to spend a lot of money. So that's why we need a strong Europe, because here is where I have my majority of all my R&D is sitting in Europe. But of course, nowadays working a lot, of course, where we see the 4G is deploying right now. I mean, 80% or 90% of all the 4G subscribers in the world is in 3 countries: Korea, Japan, and the US.
Anyone else want to contribute to the innovation point of the debate?
So maybe one comment. I think we, in Europe, and I'm talking telco and other sectors, it's not necessarily short of ideas and innovation, but we largely miss to scale up innovation globally. Global commercialization of innovation. If you look at what was de facto created out of Europe in terms of successfully globally scalable business model, little. And interestingly, most of these business models come from very small countries like Scandinavia, or very big countries. Big countries because they have the scale at home, and small countries, they have zero scale, so they know from the very beginning that they need to speed up. Now, I do agree it's not to blame political leaders only. This is what I was trying to say. I think it is about leadership for us as well, in terms of commercialization internationally, the innovation, as well as 21st century leadership for modern light touch regulation that goes together. I think it's a combined task.
Mr. Recchi, I come to you again as someone who's got fresh vision into the industry. Do you see this telecoms industry as something which is stifling or helping innovation in Europe? We can, coming from the outside, are you confident that the money is going to the right places?
Which means I haven't seen the old innovation yet, but actually, I heard the example of the car industry. I don't think applies to Europe. We have pretty good leaders in terms of innovating, and I totally agree with the comment that was before me. There is a lot of innovation. It needs to be put on the market, on the consumer side, on creating financial growth. And it's not much. I mean, if you think to America better because they have Silicon Valley, that there is a reason to be. Has been a fostering environment to create that. Who made it? Just came out of the blue, or it was a system that worked together? It was a system of education, a system of financial regulation, a system that created a full environment which nurtures that type of development. And that's what we have to do in Europe. And probably they had a more visionary planning here. I haven't seen it yet, but I think the companies I know are pretty international, pretty capable in producing technology.
Fantastic. I've got more questions, and I know the crowd does, but I'd ask the crowd now perhaps to wait until our second panel session later on today, and hopefully we can answer them then. Because I just would like to bring this great debate to an end and ask everyone to move towards a coffee break, which we're serving in the Terracan room where we had lunch. Lots to mull over, and please come back refreshed and ready for round 2 at 4:25. Thanks so much.